Charles, we have an extremely important episode of Closing In today. We're honored to be joined by Dr. Judy Mikovits. Dr. Mikovits, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason.
It's wonderful to have you. You've been doing so many important interviews lately. Charles and I have a number of things we'd love to discuss with you, but we know you only have a limited amount of time today, so I would encourage people to seek out your other interviews, including the one with Patrick Bet-David of Valuetainment. That was a very lengthy and informative interview about the medical aspects of this, the legal aspects of this, and you've also described the propaganda that's been used against you. It's a really complex situation that you've been put into, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's difficult to tell the story. And then with the actions taken by the government at every level to keep me silent for quite a long time, while they perpetrated, these really what I call these crimes against humanity, to keep the citizens not only of the United States but of the world from finding out literally what contaminated vaccines and a contaminated blood supply for almost 40 years with mouse and monkey cancer causing viruses that include actually HIV.
Absolutely. And you've written a book. People can purchase the book from Amazon.com, or perhaps if they prefer retailers that aren't controlled by the CIA. It's been published by Simon & Schuster. It's available everywhere that books are sold. It's new, called Plague of Corruption. And, you're speaking about these viruses, the contaminated blood. I know Charles is going to be very interested to ask you about some of the connects to the Clinton Foundation. And you're right, it's decades, because of course there's the Clinton Arkansas blood scandal where they were harvesting blood from prisons.
Yeah,
Right.
Dr. Judy, I don't know how much you know about me, but I'm a retired banker and I specialize in exposing complex fraud. The Clinton Foundation charity fraud is a gigantic collection of frauds, a key piece of which, for which they get credit or take credit, is their supposed fight against HIV and AIDS, where they take credit, Bill Clinton takes credit for bringing down the price of HIV/AIDS drugs, when it's my view, and I'm not a scientist, but it's my view that what really happened in 2001 and 2002 is that a decision was made that the big pharma companies knew they could not get HIV/AIDS medicine into these countries where there are no doctors, no roads, no electricity, no clean water, no nothing. And they ceded that to the generics. And Bill got in bed with his company, Ranbaxy, which you may know was disciplined, paid a $500 million fine in 2013, May 2013, for selling and distributing adulterated drugs. So we take back the history to the one you talked about in your great interview. You brought home your pioneering quest to identify what you were really fighting against in HIV. And I remember that period vividly, the early 80s, because I had just bought a farm, which my brothers referred to as a mosquito farm. There were bugs everywhere. And I remember the local headline was that HIV and AIDS would be spread by mosquitoes. And I was really terrified. And that's like 81, 82, or that time frame, 83?
Right.
So tell us a bit about your early fight against HIV and AIDS and what happened to you in the early period, in the 80s and 90s.
It was really, I was just a kid. I was a technician in Dr. Frank Rossetti's lab, and the significance of that is Dr. Frank Rossetti isolated the first human disease-causing retrovirus. It was a cancer-causing retrovirus called HTLV, human T-cell leukemia virus. I went to his lab 3 years after he published that finding, literally just after making the first immune therapy, which was interferon alpha, which is it actually will treat RNA viruses, including HIV/AIDS, and I'm going to share my screen in a minute and talk about other things. But at any rate, that work, I'm a technician, and I'm literally just doing what Dr. Rossetti and the team that included throughout the 80s, Candace Pert, who discovered and developed peptide T with Frank's, in Frank's lab, and I was a technician on that project. So validating these drugs and immune therapies for retroviruses that cause cancer, autoimmune disease, neuroimmune disease. So during that time, what we knew about the FDA, and we didn't know it was led by Tony Fauci, but what we knew was that that the treatments that were appropriate, like peptide T, which had shown value in these diseases as non-toxic immune modulators to prevent the spread of the virus through the person's reservoirs that were in certain immune cells. So we didn't know at the time that the FDA and Tony Fauci were stopping the use of those drugs. We weren't aware of why the groups ACT UP and some of the others were literally angry with scientists and saying silence equals death. And as I recalled going to AIDS meetings, international conferences throughout the 80s and 90s, for early 90s really, in Montreal, in Italy, different Sweden, there were protests outside the scientific halls, and I'm just a kid, not yet 30, and I'm wondering why, if I'm spending 24/7 essentially making drugs, why they're angry. And then at the time, culturally, we were told it was only gay men, IV drug users, prostitutes. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm working for you, and it's your bad behavior. And what I learned 30 years later, literally this pandemic, and throughout this journey of mine, as they silenced our work, is now the bad behavior is not succumbing to their toxic drugs. And now I know through movies like the Dallas Buyers Club and the band Played On, which I encourage your listeners to watch, because that's my journey. That's how we wrote both of our books, Plague and Plague of Corruption, because that's what we were seeing. We were seeing healthy people get diseases that only old people get, like Kaposi sarcoma, and then we knew that that Kaposi sarcoma was associated. We actually isolated another herpes virus, and that viruses never travel alone. So they'll travel with other bacteria. So these opportunistic infections were what was driving the diseases. And what the government was doing was any therapy that wouldn't work. And here we have therapies that would work, and we knew would work. And the government, the FDA, just like we're seeing today, kept those therapies for being used. So yeah, you're looking at the paperback of Plague, and Plague is that book was in press and published when I met Brian Hooker, who uncovered the corruption with respect to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and how they had literally published fraud and burned all the data and thrown away all the data. But one scientist on the study, William Thompson, while he published the fraud and he covered up the data for 20 years, he had actually saved the data in his safe. So in the paperback, I have new front material that wasn't in the hardback, because the paperback was published in 2017, and I put some of what I knew happened at that time that I didn't know before, on how Tony Fauci and company directed away from our research, and what we discovered in 2009, that there was a family of mouse and even monkey viruses known as XMRVs, xenotropic murine leukemia so mouse cancer causing viruses, retroviruses, a new family of human retrovirus that was then just associated with prostate cancer, and they only saw the sequences. So we were the first to isolate that virus from humans with disease, and we isolated it not only from people with cancer, but from family members with chronic fatigue syndrome and autism spectrum disorders. It became quickly clear, just like in the 80s. The first thing we did when our 2009 science paper was published October 8th was start checking the blood supply. So in March
Sorry,
29th.
Dr. Judy,
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to make sure that we can ask you some important questions, and a lot of people can hear these details in some of the previous interviews.
Okay.
Part of what I'm
Perfect.
observing
Okay.
about your story is that there are aspects to it that are very complex, the medical aspects, and when people listen, it's difficult for them to understand and evaluate those aspects. And I wanted to try to explore some things that I've observed, some patterns that you are pointing out to people. You're
So
talking
can
about
you
these.
see the
Yes.
picture on the screen?
Yes, indeed.
That's the question you ask. So this picture, the who and why, there's Hillary Clinton in 2011.
Yes.
After I'm fired.
Yep. The aspects that are fascinating about your story to me are the patterns that I see emerging, things that you're telling us about mouse diseases and primate diseases in vaccines. I wonder if you've ever heard of Judith Baker. She tells a story that's remarkably similar to yours. She was a very young scientist. She was hired to work with Alton Ochsner to do what she thought was curing cancer, but throughout the course of her research, she realized that they were weaponizing cancer, much like you thought you were curing these diseases, but you have revealed in your interviews that various flu vaccines and things are actually putting coronaviruses into people's bodies, and you have spoken out adamantly against the wearing of masks because it's going to actually cause people to become sick from dormant viruses that are already in their bodies. Did I understand that aspect correctly?
That absolutely is correct. That is why, that is what I've been, fighting. Number one, please, I pray every time I see somebody with a mask on, please take off the mask, because we are the ones who are susceptible. And I say we, because I've had pleurisy since I was a child. I'm an identical twin born 6 weeks early, so my lungs didn't fully develop. So any stress like a mask or anything else will cause me not only to start coughing, but I will actually get sick. And that's
very
true.
Likely many people have conditions that will exacerbate that. Because the other pattern that I see is that you're describing a decades-long action, method and what's the word I'm looking for? Pattern and practice by Anthony Fauci of basically using medical science that people don't understand, propaganda, as you call it, social engineering, as I call it, to fool the public into thinking that doing the opposite of what will help them is what they should do, making people sick, resulting in these negative outcomes. And then when someone like you comes forward with tangible evidence that could expose their plan, they use lawfare to destroy you, to demonetize you, to prevent you from defending yourself and bringing this information forward. Is that approximately accurate?
That's approximately accurate. It's actually more than that. Actually, they'll kill you if they can.
That's right. But they would prefer to kill you by, you've told us, suicide or financial death, to just basically make your voice so inconsequential while Anthony Fauci appears on the news every day with the President of the United States. Of course, people are going to assume, the people who haven't heard your story will presume that Fauci has credibility and you do not.
Correct. And they purposely do that. And that's the who and the why. And you don't only see Tony Fauci in the picture I'm sharing on my screen, but you also see essentially the heads of every government agency right there. And it's happened. It's happened for, since HIV, since I walked in NIH, this similar thing of preventing the treatments and preventing these things that we discovered. 1980 was interferon alpha. Very, very low dose would prevent coronaviruses from, literally sprayed in your mouth would prevent coronaviruses from infecting you, from literally from dividing, from doing anything. They'd keep them from jumping from animals, species, if you put the type 1 interferon in their water. So that was 40 years ago. The FDA kept that from, you literally said, no, you can't sell that anymore, and went into, it wasn't my office, but another scientist and his manufacturer, and they find violations. It's not just me, it's doctors and scientists around the world. It's the prevention. That's why I mentioned peptide T a few minutes ago, and that's the subject of the Dallas Buyers Club. Peptide T was non-toxic, cost nothing. It never did make it to market. And it would have been a valuable treatment to prevent the spread and to prevent the development of disease in the infected. Because you're infected, you're not sick. An infection is not a disease until it becomes a disease. That's why we use immune therapies and immune modulators. And that's theoretically what a vaccine is supposed to do, is give you immunity. You develop antibodies. You've seen this before in a weaker form, technically. Usually they say attenuated. That's the technical term. And so the next time you see that virus, you won't get as sick, if you get sick at all. And so now the government is using those same, the pattern is, number one, the vaccines don't work. And we can see that from the outbreaks around the world. But worse than that, they're causing this explosion of chronic diseases. And yes, we uncovered not one virus, but whole families of viruses in these vaccines, in the polio vaccines that are causing, the only thing causing polio in this country today is the polio vaccine.
Wow. And you've been very clear in previous interviews that you're not anti-vax, you're anti-corruption. You said something that really stuck in my ear in that Patrick Bet-David interview. You said that you're not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not saying that you are, but you have provided extensive evidence and details of a massive conspiracy.
Yes. I mean, I'm not a theorist. It's a reality. Right. And it's a reality I didn't want to see. It's a reality that still is hard for Dr. Rossetti and I, who still worked together 37 years ago. He just said it this morning in a walk. It's hard to think of your discovery, interleukin-2, or this first human cancer-causing virus, in a whole lifetime of drug development and immune therapies. Vaccines are immune therapies. They're intended to educate the immune system to prevent or treat disease or infection. That's a vaccine. We've spent our entire life developing those. Those aren't being used. And what is being used and perpetrated on the country, the worst of which now are actually killing people and driving these, I call them pandemics, and these diseases. And you can look at Zika, you can look at the Ebola outbreak of 2014 that killed 21,000 Liberians. And you can look at H1N1, swine flu, bird flu, all the way back through the 80s, where, since 1984 and probably even before, the first was 1976, I believe, a swine flu, where the vaccine caused more damage than the pandemic, and essentially the tipping point is now because the mouse cancer causing viruses we discovered are contagious. The Ebola strain that killed 21,000 Liberians is contagious. And you see the exact same pattern of how the CDC covered it up, just like William Thompson. They just, every time it's proven that the vaccines have never been tested, that they're unsafe, and that they're actually driving the disease. Every time that happens, Tony Fauci comes up with a a pandemic, a cover-up, to scare everybody and turn everybody's attentions and drive more and more lawmakers, Congress and the Senate, to remove our constitutional rights, just as wearing the masks. It's against the American Disabilities Act, the ADA, and HIPAA, HIPAA. This is the Privacy Acts in medicine. You can't ask someone if they have, what retrovirus they have. You simply give them the drug. So you can't bias these people and stigmatize these people. And in fact, that's what they're doing now, bypassing every one of the laws for this pandemic. And the methods they're preventing us from getting the treatments that work, that are very cheap. And we don't need a vaccine if you've already developed an antibody. And in fact, we know there's something called ADCC, antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity. So the vaccine, if you already have an antibody, you're already infected and you've developed that immune response, you don't need a vaccine. And the vaccines they've designed could in fact have kill you through that ADCC. It's like an explosion the next time you see that pathogen. And that's exactly what we've seen in every trial that's been done since SARS in 2001, SARS, MERS. All of these are vaccine-driven pandemic, and mixing animal and human tissues is how these viruses are emerging from our laboratories. That's how the Ebola virus became contagious. That is airborne. When you've got airborne and coughing, literally coughing Ebola, and it's very clear. And what did the CDC do? Oh, the CDC changed the definition of contagious. So with Ebola, when you cough, it only goes 3 feet. And with measles, when you cough, it goes 6 feet. Well, this is ridiculous, and we believe it as a people because criminals like Fauci are standing up there protecting so that nobody. And I show in that picture Harold Varmus, Nobel laureate, and Francis Collins standing right next to him. That's 2011. Right after they all made XMRV go away, and they're giving an award to an Israeli researcher for cannabis research. Our government holds the patent on cannabis research for pain and for all of the diseases they're causing, including this one, and all the money's going overseas, and it's illegal to do that research here. It's a Schedule I drug that people can't get. I can't ship juice to people because it's against the law to federally ship it. So at every level of our the highest health and human services, it has nothing to do with public health and everything to do with wealth and cover up of 4 decades of crime.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I'm going to do after this interview, I'll go and I'll read your book. Both books, but I want to talk for a second with you about Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci and these models. In the world that I come from, I'm not a scientist, but I have an MBA, I was in business. We don't regard models in the financial world, most of us, as anything other than a tool. A model is never going to tell you the precise answer, it'll give you a range or whatever. But when somebody comes to me, if I were Donald Trump, somebody came to me and said, Mr. President, what I need you to do is put 30 million people out of work, shut the economy down, because this model here says that maybe 2.2 million people are going to die quickly and overwhelm the hospital system. So reluctantly, against my better judgment, I shouldn't have done it. I shut the country down. And then I have to endure, you referred to her as, I think, Dr. Scarf getting up there, or Dr. Scarface, and she, with this model that is immediately proven wrong, she's still talking about models and trends and graphs. There's no explicit analysis that I've seen so far by age cohort of how many people died from COVID-19 alone and how many people had other comorbidities that maybe were exacerbated by COVID-19 or not. There's been no precision on that, on the timeline, on the geography, by age. it strikes me as, just as somebody who understands numbers, it's gross misconduct. I mean, the person who put that model together, I gather, was caught in London doing certain crazy things yesterday, but I think it's time to go and re-examine the premise under which we've shut this country down, and examine Birx's background and qualifications, and examine Fauci's conflicts of interest. I mean, this to me is, you call it a pandemic, I think it's the crime of the millennium.
I think it's the crime of the millennia as well, because in fact, Dr. Birx was guilty of one of those fraudulent papers where she said a vaccine was effective from the scientific studies in animals for HIV. And I believe that was in the early 90s, along with Robert Redfield, who's now the head of the CDC, Dr. Redfield. So both of them were guilty, again, of another piece of fraudulent, where fraud, it's science, it's propaganda masquerading as science. So that's why I wear my mask from New Orleans, but it won't cover it'll only cover my eyes. And because it's a crime. It's criminal. We don't need to re-examine these models. Scientists don't use models. I never used a model. I never used statistics. You can see these diseases, and everything about it's been corrupt. They've committed crimes. They literally should be in federal prison or worse. And really, Fauci, this is treason. This is treason against our knowing what he told President Trump was a lie. And every president for 5 generations. The presidents aren't the problem. They're relying on people who are supposed to be, presidents don't have MDs or PhDs and don't develop drugs and don't understand virology. They rely on these men. And by the way, Bill Gates doesn't have an MD or a PhD either, and shouldn't be here, shouldn't be directing anything at these medical programs. And his philanthropy, while he kills millions worldwide, is tax-free. He doesn't pay taxes. This is insanity.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of work. We've done over 200 videos exposing the broad contours and really the narrow details of the Clinton charity frauds, which are actively supported by the Gates Foundation, and there are many, many problems with that. I know in the interview that Jason referenced, you didn't have a comment about Dr. Tedros and at the World Health Organization, and I have done my own work on there. I don't know if are you aware that Yale University entered into a program in 2005 with Dr. Tedros when he was Minister of Health in Ethiopia, and a part of the Clinton Foundation called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative that actually didn't exist. It was never organized lawfully. It was never operated. We've done show after this going back to June of 2017, have never been challenged on this by the Clintons or anybody. And Tedros merrily then took tens of millions of dollars to distribute what we believe are adulterated HIV/AIDS drugs inside Ethiopia at a time when there was a raging sectarian civil war. And this guy then gets he goes on the board of the Global Fund, and we have colleagues who believe that as much as 75% of the money that went through the Global Fund was stolen. He's on the board. He's chairman of it. Birx is now on the board of it. And this guy is head of the World Health Organization. I mean, I wouldn't ask him for directions to the local subway, let alone give him the power to shut the entire global economy down. It's preposterous.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't aware of it until Patrick Bet-David made me aware of it, and then I asked Dr. Rossetti, as I usually do, and he said, "Yeah, this is horrid." What is the World Health Organization? Has their list of essential medicines, and all of those. One of them includes, as we talked about, hydroxychloroquine, and the other includes a drug called Suramin, which is for African sleeping sickness, and it's an antiretroviral. That's the one that is actually curative for these virus-associated cancers. And a small clinical, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial was done in 2015 in autism and Bayer. and now Bayer Monsanto actually took the drug away from the children, took the drug away from everyone. That's when, it was well before that, but that's why we wrote Plague of Corruption, because this is on the WHO's list of essential medicines for 100 years. And just like chloroquine is 70 years, so it's been in use. And these are the kinds of things that Dr. Fauci calls anecdotal. And so my entire career, our discoveries are called anecdotal, and they aren't approved, simple natural product therapies, not approved by the FDA, or you have to bribe the FDA. It costs like $1 million for my small company to literally get in line. And yet they can push these drugs out, these other things that aren't tested, like is it remdesivir?
Right.
The Gilead drug. So Fauci, Del Bigtree on his thehighwire.com show last week did a beautiful expose. He's not a scientist either, so it was wonderful, showing how that drug, the clinical trials that Tony Fauci is leading and doing himself, and you hear him in the president's ear, they keep skewing the trials and changing them because, in fact, it has no benefit. And in fact, it's making people a lot worse, if not killing them, just like the mask, just like every single thing they're telling us to do has nothing to do with public health. Why would you close bathrooms? Why would you close all the bathrooms and take chairs away from the elderly so they can't sit down? They can't go on the beach unless they keep walking. The people are going to die.
Yeah. And another thing, I don't know if you've read Catherine Eban's book, Bottle of Lies, but that's all about Runboxy, and it's really more about how over decades, the decades you were so involved in this, right, the geniuses who are the policy people behind U.S. and Western health have allowed the production of essential drugs to be basically concentrated in either China, India, or both, where there are no controls, right, no effective controls. And I read in that Bottle of Lies book, which I really commend to your reading if you haven't read it.
I'm going to. Thank you.
They talk about the special deal that was cut with India, where we would give the Indian drug manufacturers advance notice of any inspection visits. And you can't do that. I mean, right, well, not in India, not anywhere else. If you've got a troubled manufacturing facility, you swoop in with no notice. So, correct. And then back on your interview, you were asked who was the head of the FBI at the time you were attacked in 2011. It was actually Mueller. Robert Mueller was the same person, who perpetrated the Russia hoax as special prosecutor, right, or jumped on people using stormtrooper tactics, in my view. Right. And while you were under assault,
they did that to me.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for that. I hope you get damages out of that, or you get justice out of that, because it was a horrible treatment.
I'll never see it. No.
Well,
I learned very quickly our legal system has nothing to do with justice and everything. Yeah. It's just like our medical system. It's protect the criminals. And I was literally told that by the FBI agents. I was saying, well, my employers, they retaliated in RICO because they're misappropriating federal funds and publishing fraud, and this was Tony Fauci, Ian Lipkin, that did me a whole lot of good. It brought the vengeance down even harder by the FBI, who held and the Attorney General of Nevada, and Robert Jones, the judge, and the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, holding us literally our case under seal, meaning nobody could know about it, while they decided if they were going to give it whistleblower status. 5 years. It's supposed to be a couple of months. Held it under seal 5 years. Do you know when they dropped it, Charles? They dropped it when I gave this talk that I just showed you the picture of the who and the what. They literally dismissed it with prejudice after being under seal for 5 years. No lawyer, no trial, no nothing.
Why do you think they did that?
Pro se.
Why do you think they did that, Dr. Mikovits?
because
Why
I had 97 witnesses that would have proved all of this then. They have a hard drive.
Right. And when they dismiss it with prejudice, that was them dismissing your case against them with prejudice? Is that it?
Correct.
So you can never bring it back.
Their case against me without prejudice, meaning they could come back any day and find new evidence. That's how they threatened me.
Right.
We'll take you back to jail, and this time you won't get out. And the line from my corrupt lawyer, Dennis Jones, who worked both in Reno and in Ventura, and literally just got bought off. You lose your life if you go against them, and he wasn't willing to go against them.
When was that dropped?
Dennis Jones. Let's see, what's his last name? It's
when was your case? When was your case dropped?
Oh, the Monday after October 13th, 2019.
19.
Morning 19.
Wow.
Yeah, that's him.
According to the internet, he's a super lawyer. But what you're
describing... he's a super lawyer at protecting criminals. He's real good at that, but they don't protect innocent people, and that's what the bail bondsman said in my, and it's in my first book. He got us out of bail with $100,000 bail on a handshake because he knew everything that was done to me was full of shit, and he said innocent people the bondsman, bail bondsman, did not, nobody else. I never got a single day in court. Judges bought off, and it's proven. We've got thousands of pages of documents, just like William Thompson had, and he never got to Congress either. 2014. That's why I was telling that story in a different way. So this plague of corruption, the patterns are all there. And the evidence is all there. So when you read the last chapter of Plague of Corruption, you're going to realize, in fact, the whole book, but when you see the last chapter, it's going to point directly to the corrupt FBI, because we had a day-long conversation taped in Ventura in May of 2014. When Dr. Rossetti brought the evidence down, and we handed him a terabyte hard drive of proof. And that was the proof for those 5 years for those studies. And did they do anything about it? No, they dropped it as soon as I gave that talk and proved the who and why at the truth about cancer. And with prejudice means you got to basically start over. It's gone, and it's as if you made it up to make money for your books.
Right. And you're talking about patterns, Dr. Mikovits.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about something that I believe matches the pattern that you're describing. Early on in at least the United States, aspect of this pandemic, there was a paper put out by some independent scientists in India talking about the uncanny similarity of unique inserts in the 2019 novel coronavirus spike protein. And the similarities they drew were to an HIV-1 glycoprotein called GP120 and GAG. It's interesting to note that there's a patent, which Dr. Anthony Fauci is one of the 4 inventors of, for an agitator to this glycoprotein. It seems remarkable that these Indian scientists would say that it's extremely unlikely that these uncanny similarities in terms of the DNA sequencing would appear inserted into this coronavirus. Can you give us something between, the medical explanation and a layperson's explanation of what this means and how this could have gotten there? Is this gene editing of HIV and coronavirus to make coronavirus more dangerous?
Well, it can be, and that's where they get you on the language, like you say, the complexity of it. So the first pattern is the Indians, those scientists were forced to retract that paper, and that implies fraud. Withdrawing doesn't imply wrongdoing. Retraction implies fraud. So that's number one. And the second thing is you don't have to edit it. You don't have to cut and paste and engineer it if you are growing the coronaviruses in the Vero E6 monkey cell line, which the NIH got, which Tony Fauci shipped to, and paid for from his grants. That cell line from the Fort Detrick USAMRIID directly to Wuhan, China. So when you grow it in a cell line that contains SIV, which is simian immune deficiency viruses, and other, then it's easy for that recombination to occur. And that's one of the things we found in our studies in the vaccines. When you inject this animal tissue, it's very easy because we grow our vaccines in those same cell lines. So where it's easy to get coronaviruses injected because all animals have coronaviruses, and we grow so much in animal tissue. So that's the explanation. You don't have to say they cut and paste it, because everybody says, oh, there's no evidence of that. But you can say when you put it through a cell line, it's not naturally occurring if it went by way of a laboratory, and it did. And it's clear in that paper, the 2015 Nature Med paper that we showed in the Epoch Times documentary. It's clear where, all you have to do is follow the money. Who funds the studies, and where did they grow the virus? They grew it in monkey kidney cells that contain the simian, the HIV precursor. That's how they said HIV got into man, was somebody forgot how to cook their monkeys when they were eating them in Africa. So is the pattern the same? Oh, yeah, it came from a seafood market. Well, we all believed that then, and we're not going to believe that now. We're not, as a people, that stupid. At least I hope we're not.
Now, you were speaking quite a bit about retroviruses, and I think this is perhaps one thing that escapes the understanding of lay people. As I understood it, a retrovirus just attacks a cell and puts its genetic material in there and starts replicating. There's another scientist we've heard quite a lot about recently, this Harvard nanotechnology expert, Charles Lieber, who was indicted by the Department of Justice in January of 2020. Lieber was the head of the Lieber Research Group, which was a pioneering firm in the area of nanotechnology. And again, this is something that I don't know very much about, other than sort of descriptions that they're making nanowires, nanotubes, and nanobots that can actually enter a human cell and are so small that they can conduct operations inside the cell without disrupting normal cell activity. It sounds to me like something that could be made to be essentially a mini robot virus. Could nanotechnology attack a cell in the same way a virus can?
Well, yes, and even worse, because we have locks and keys. They're called mechanisms for things that get inside a cell. We have gatekeepers. That's why we have cell membranes and nuclear membranes. A retrovirus is 100 nanometers, so it's a pathogen, but it still has to use receptors. But the nanobots are considerably smaller than that, and a coronavirus is 30 nanometers. So now you can enter every cell in the body, even where you're not, where our immune system protects you from getting in. And that's why, yes, that could have been engineered that way. But yes, these things pass by and you don't even know they're there.
Is that guy Dr. Lieber or Dr. Evil?
Yeah.
Well, but so many doctors, it's not just him. And this is what we're trying to expose in the plague of corruption. It's the entire industry of how we do HHS that has to end now. It's how grants are funded. It's how papers are published. It's how you either do or don't survive as a researcher. And the fraud is at the highest level of the government, the gatekeepers. That's why the who and why. So I have a hard stop here to talk.
Yeah. We'd love to speak to you some more in the future, Dr. Judy, because there's so many more questions I want to ask you. Perhaps nanotechnology could have been integrated in previous vaccines. You've spoken about how some things can activate these dormant vaccines. A lot of people have questions about 5G and chemtrailing, but we'll have to come back to that another day. Thank you so much.
That'd be great if you give me time to study it. I'll put that on the map and explain it in hopefully lay terms.
Thank you so much
for joining us.
Thank you for your
Dr.
struggles.
Mikovits. Yes.
I
best of
appreciate
luck.
it, Charles. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, Charles, that was an excellent conversation with Dr. Judy Mikovits. Yeah, she's out. All she needs to do is hang up the Zoom call and she'll be done completely. There we go. Fascinating stuff, Charles. Now we've got one of the foremost microbiologists, virologists, telling us that the idea that I came up with as a dope, that nanotechnology could perhaps help a virus do something, be activated by some outside force, act on a cell to simulate the behavior of a virus. This is an incredible new area that, as you said, Dr. Evil, who knows what could be done with that type of technology, Charles?
Right. This to me is, I shudder to think why we're here in this place. I mean, you think about what we've been doing. You and I have been
in this place, this apartment? Or
no. As a country, as a world, that suddenly we are hostage to Dr. Tedros, Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Birx. And once again, I think President Trump has, in the best way of looking at it, has been completely hoodwinked by these people. I mean, this is, you don't go in.
We all have.
Well, but I mean, he's the President of the United States with formidable powers beyond his personal wealth. And he has experience looking at investments and having people come to him and say, here's how many bottles of Trump vodka we're going to sell. We got this pie in the sky thing and it doesn't come out. So he shuts the company down. I mean, we really need, with great force, we need to go into Christopher Wray's office, the head of the FBI. He needs to be removed forthwith from the FBI, because the FBI is a common theme here, whether it's the Russian hoax, Ukraine thing, you name it, Ramboxy, the Clinton Foundation. The FBI is covering up too much criminal activity implicating current and former members of the FBI at the very highest levels of the FBI. And here we are stuck at home in an exercise with no end in sight. Today they blasted over various media here in New York that deaths supposedly from coronavirus, they were goosed by 1,700 yesterday for nursing homes that hadn't been counted before. We're now to 25,000 supposed deaths from COVID-19. We've got anecdotal reports from whether it's funeral directors or other people saying there's incentives to classify a death as a COVID death. And of course, you're going to have more COVID deaths in that kind of environment if there's lax screening of it, lax analysis, and there are financial incentives. But the good news out of all that is that the overall number of deaths in the country is running at a lower rate in the period March 16th to the present, roughly.
Charles, what was this thing where they said the CDC, I saw Dinesh D'Souza had tweeted that they went from 63,000 to 37,000, and then all the fact checkers said, no, that didn't happen. What was up with that?
Well, they're constantly refining the estimates. And as we said on air with Dr. Judy, who was so kind with her time, and I thought her comments were fantastic. They don't do the rigorous kind of testing when you get down to cause of death. Particularly, in the case of my own mother, I've talked about it before. When she died, they couldn't assign one cause of death because there were multiple ailments, and it was unclear which one ultimately caused her, in the end, to pass away. And so when I see people, the great modeling expert, Dr. Scarface, get up there and put all these charts up on the wall about 2.2 million, and then take a victory lap because it's only at 70,000, and because we flattened the curve or whatever her argument is, I just want to fire her on the spot. Along with Fauci, along with Redfield, all these people.
Well, I'm thinking incarcerate them on the spot. I was watching a couple of weeks ago some interviews with Minnesota State Senator Dr. Scott Jensen. Now, in addition to being a state senator, he's a medical doctor. So he had received an official communique from the Minnesota Department of Health instructing on new guidelines for how to write up these cause of death documents that he, as a doctor, this guy looks like he's in his 50s or 60s. He's been a doctor for 20, 30 years or more. And he was describing how unusual this was. It's strange to me, Charles, the doctors that have come out in social media, and how doctors like Scott Jensen, who he's not affiliated with a hospital, it's fair to presume that if he's a state senator, he's maybe retired or temporarily taken a hiatus from practicing and more focused on his state and his role as a legislator. He's saying that this is unprecedented, but yet we don't hear anything about him. Then we get these doctors coming out with dubious statements about ventilators and complicated language that the average person can't understand, with a sort of encoded message in there that this particular doctor, who's being spread like wildfire, and I'm not talking about Dr. Jensen, I'm talking about Cameron Kyle Seidel, I'm talking about this nurse who was releasing a video filled with foul language, which I don't necessarily mind if somebody wants to do that, but it seemed contradictory to the message the nurse was trying to get out, to fill that video with really foul language. She's making direct accusations of murder against the hospital, which in my view would seem to give her tremendous legal liability to make those kind of direct accusations in a social media video like that. And I'm looking at the social engineering aspects of this. We got Dr. Judy to speak about that a bit. And I want to understand a little better. When she says propaganda, I feel she's talking about social engineering. When she says the courts are corrupt, I don't believe the entire U.S. justice system is corrupt. I believe there are very powerful and very skilled individuals who are engaging in lawfare and are able to manipulate the justice system in this way. So it's an interesting story.
Right. And if we get to speak to her again, which I hope it would be my great honor to do that, and I think yours as well, I would love to drill down on an issue. She's got this 40-year career now fighting HIV and AIDS and other retroviruses. And here we are in the United States. We've spent a tremendous amount of money, and infection rates, supposedly for HIV, are way under what they are in many countries in Africa 40 years into this fight. Indeed, in some countries in Africa, even though we have spent in this country and other donor countries, I'm thinking of Norway, I'm thinking of England and France and other generous donors, even though we spent hundreds of billions of dollars fighting HIV and AIDS, for some reason, throughout Africa, infection rates in places like Lesotho and certain other countries are up above 20%, 25%, 30%. And nobody seems to be asking some key questions like, where did all this 100 billion plus money actually go? Who is making sure that the money was spent for its intended purpose? Were there accusations of fraud and corruption? The answer is yes. What did these UN and World Health Organization bodies do to follow up the accusations of fraud? Did they catch any of the perpetrators? The answer is no. And are these same people who are above national law for the moment? President Trump, I believe, does have the ability to, with regard to U.S. law, say we're going to strip the WHO from protection. Does the same people who are sitting here demanding now trillions of dollars to fight coronavirus are the people who can't explain what happened fighting HIV and AIDS and won't tell us what happened to the money. And oh, by the way, in the case of Dr. Fauci, have patents where they're going to benefit from the sale of these vaccines. I mean, this is just so obviously a massive scam. The regulators need to be regulated. They actually need to be incarcerated. Yeah. And examples need to be set here because we've allowed this 4 decades. The typical generation in genealogy, in modern generations, is about 30 years on average. So here we've had more than a generation of epic fraud in the healthcare system globally, in the education system. She didn't get into the peer review issue of these, how they pressure you in detail. Yeah. You know, if you come up with something that contravenes the state, the deep state, then you start getting your funding pulled, you get fired, whatever. So these peer-reviewed articles are garbage.
That's what I was trying to get at with the Indian article, is that it matches the pattern of what they did to Dr. Mikovits. If anyone comes up with scientific evidence that countermands the social engineering operation that they're trying to foist on everyone, like this disease is due to gay people. That's going to foment hatred towards gay people, particularly embolden those who feel for religious or other reasons that they already dislike gay people. It's going to ostracize a particular group. I liked what she said about HIPAA laws. I wanted to get a comment from her with regard to these cops beating everybody down over doing something that is medically nonsensical. We've got cops enforcing medical stuff that doesn't make scientific sense.
Right. It makes about as much sense as the couple I saw coming into your building. There was a guy with a mask, and he was carrying an umbrella over his female companion. So she didn't have a mask because she was smoking a cigarette.
Oh.
And I'm sure they won't get a summons. They'll probably get the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, see, the thing I wanted to get at with this, creating a disease to sort of target a specific population, HIV and AIDS could have been a beta test or could have been the start of the plan. And when they realize how well it's working, they think of new ways that they could. This is the way any development of anything works. You have the prototype, you see what works, what doesn't work, you refine it, you improve it, and things get better and better over time. This has been happening since the 70s, the 80s. And here we are, they've got now computers, CRISPR editing, they've got artificial intelligence to help them sequence these things. The level of sophistication of this type of viral biowarfare attack has become it's so much more sophisticated than it was. And for non-government actors, Charles, I really feel that this is the first instance of a sort of a private, it's a criminal organization declaring war on the world.
Yeah, and I mean, what has been going on, we've been talking about this for some time. I toy with the working title of my book, either Merchants in Misery or Merchants of Misery. We have this do-gooder group, supposed do-gooder group, which in this country takes credit for its birth around the time of the Civil Rights Movement. And what you do when you're a merchant in misery is you say, we have got a massive problem over here. We need tons of resources. If we don't get these resources, then the entire world's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so it's been working so well. If you look at the explosion in non-military government spending in this country, it used to be a tiny fraction of the total, and now it's massive sums annually. Not to mention our debt. These are people. They say we've got a climate problem, we've got an environmental problem.
But what was that organization? The UN?
Which one?
You said an organization started that was...
No, it's a loose affiliation. You go into the various Clinton books, there's written tons of them, they're overpaid. Every single criminal or co-conspirator in the Clinton operation got his or her start in the civil rights movement in the South. David Kendall, the different people, name after name takes credit, for their sainthood in advance as, having been involved in that. And you'll see it start.
I love his credits.
Yeah.
He's had a checkered career. It's just like David Kendall is a professional dope. He's a checkered legal career. That's the wrong way to start your resume as a lawyer.
Well, it depends what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for a lawyer, right? This is a code. This is your 33. Maybe there are 33 words in that sentence.
There might well be. And you know what, Charles? A lot of people have been sending me. We could do it right now. I mean, if you just put in coronavirus 33, so many articles come up. Jobless claims reach 33 million. 33-page study says new coronavirus strain spreads faster and more contagious. 33 confirmed new cases. China found 33 mutations. 33 prisoners released.
This could be Jason's first law.
I mean, I'm just saying, I want people to see that more closely so that they can read it. I'm just saying, Charles, you are a person who deals in numbers and statistics and probabilities. How likely is it that this occurrence of 33 could just be random or accidental?
Well, that gets into something called Benford's Law.
No effing way?
No. It has to do, I think, in part with the fact that we use base 10. Base 10 as opposed to using base 9 or base 8.
Meaning this could be mathematically possible
It's
at 33?
possible. It's possible. But remember, what we're dealing with is 7.5 billion people on the planet. we're dealing with 200 countries.
But everywhere, the death toll is up 33 new states, 33% of Asians are doing something.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly novel, let's put it that way, and worth thinking about.
Healthy 33-year-old recounts falling ill to coronavirus. I mean, to me, 33
what if you put
is code for bullshit, Charles.
Well, try a different one as an example. Try, don't say the number, but pick a number between 1 and 99. Don't say it yet. Just try to do it randomly. The first number that comes in your head. Let's see what happens.
I didn't even look at the keyboard. Oh, it's 37.
All right, let's see what happens.
37 new coronavirus cases. Coronavirus researcher.
Wait, how many stories did you get? 2.3 million. Now try it with 33. The same number of results? That's odd.
This is kind of weird. So what if we change it up and make it
slightly fewer? This could also have to do with how Google, the algorithms for how they select results.
Interesting.
And I guess I don't know how to do the coronavirus and 33. Is that just a plus, or is that?
Yeah, I guess. It's an interesting exploration. I liked her answer about the nanobots as well, because there's so many pieces to this puzzle that we have not heard more details about with regard to the Chinese students that were arrested along with Charles Lieber. What are they talking about Lieber? I mean, obviously they don't tell the public about what's happening in an ongoing investigation. But I mean, if we know these facts and details, Charles, how could President Trump not know? I mean, how does he trust Fauci and Birx? And
I think there's a much deeper game going on here. We should maybe just spend a few seconds talking about what's likely to happen this week, especially on Friday. On Friday, we have the unemployment report coming out. And I watched some wingnut on Bloomberg, who I think shouldn't be on television, but talking about how the market is not going to care about the unemployment numbers, it's not going to care about anything because the market is expecting a swift return to normalcy, maybe back to where we were before. And just, is that what it is right now?
303 right now.
There you go. I planned that, Jason. I planned that. But anyway, so this unemployment report is going to be horrifying.
Yeah, because like 30 million people are unemployed. They've closed every business.
Well, it'll be an estimate as of mid-month April. So they're not going to have, they do the surveys mid-month, so they're not going to have the latest, the worst figures. So it's not going to be as bad as 30 million, but it's going to be really bad. Yeah. Bearing in mind that I think in the 2008-9 timeframe, I think 12 million jobs were lost roughly in that deep downdraft between October, let's say, or September, October of 2008 and March, June 2009. So 12 million. Here we're talking about, it's going to be 20 million probably, 20 million in this report, and then the next one will probably be approaching 30 million. Now the problem with all this is that you can do a lot of things. I mean, you can't bleach bit your existence. I said, well, I suppose you could nuke the planet, but you can't eliminate the reality that today is May 6th, right? And you had a whole bunch of graduations that were going to happen. You have a lot of students that were expecting to have jobs. Their lives have been ruined by this decision.
Why have their lives been ruined?
Well, because what's going to happen is businesses they're certainly not going to want to hire people who've never worked for them before. The first people they're going to hire back are the people they laid off, right? So they're going to cut back on job offers, and then the next class coming out in 2021,
they're going to default on all their loans.
They may default on. They can't actually. The way the loans are structured now, you can't default on them. You actually have to pay your student loans off. Wow. You can't discharge them in bankruptcy.
So they're going to have this debt chasing them around for the rest of their lives, and they'll be working at where?
And
Amazon.
They'll be competing against the 2021 class for jobs. So this is really a crushing, right? The same number of jobs, if we're lucky, will be on offer in 2021, and you'll have twice the year's number of graduates looking for those jobs. So that's
when you create a generation of unemployed, what's that going to do to crime? What's that going to do to?
Well, it'll be, I don't know if your parents are like this, but my father was a young boy through the Depression, and his parents were very They're comfortable, but nonetheless thrifty. And so I grew up as a young boy. You know, I would be dispatched as the eldest person to go to the Chinese laundromat to pick up the shirts, and I'd bring them back, and I'd move to throw out the paper and the string, and my father would say, "Not so fast.
Save it."
You know, fold the paper, create a string ball,
Yeah.
save your rubber bands. I mean, that all arose out of his
Stays
existence in the
with
Depression.
them from the Depression, exactly.
And what we're going to get a new bunch of people here are going to say, now, wait a minute, why was I going to the restaurant?
Right.
You know, you don't know what the food is, you don't know anything. I mean, I don't want to go to restaurants anymore. I want to cook at home.
No
Why
movies.
No movies. Why were we getting on planes to go all the way to Norway with sneezing babies? And we don't know, you know,
Right.
you went to New Zealand with a bunch of sneezing babies, maybe. And you know, you're not going to want to do that anymore. So the behavior patterns are going to change. And as happened in 2008 and 9, the people who have been itching to replace human labor with machines and engineered solutions,
Here they go.
here's your excuse. You just say, you know. Now, that's the negative. That's one of the negatives. Another negative for the market is all this agitation against Donald Trump. You know, we know that if Donald Trump loses to Joe Biden, you know, we may as well just get on a raft somewhere and go to some island, right? Because everyone will be speaking Chinese within 6 months if he becomes president.
Gibberish if Joe Biden becomes president.
Right. But the real villain waiting in the wings is Hillary Clinton, and it's very crystal clear to me. She's doing isn't it saintly of her to do a fundraiser for Joe Biden, which she's going to do, where tickets are expected to go for up to $50,000 each.
What?
Yeah. So she's standing in the wings waiting to be drafted. I don't know what Michelle's view is, whether she wants to run or not, but the market will begin, if the economy takes another big leg down following Friday, if the stock market and job losses accelerate, right, the market is going to start to assign a higher and higher probability to Trump losing. Either because, I mean, the question of Olivier Nuzzi at that press conference, the one who said, back in several weeks ago, already more dead people from COVID than in the Vietnam War.
Wow.
You presided over that. Do you have a right to run for re-election? That's going to be the refrain that the left is going to try.
Right.
The anti-Trumpers are going to try and Trump. And Trump is sitting there almost 74 years old. And he's, in theory, a billionaire many times over. There will come a moment in time where he might just say,
Do I need this?
Yeah, exactly. Do I need this? I mean, I kind of like Melania, and I've done 4 years for free. Why don't I put some buildings up? And
I don't think he's going to do that. He's dug in.
I know. I'm just saying. But the issue is whether he does it. The issue is whether the market begins to look at this and say, and assign a higher. You know, the media is going to assign a higher and higher probability to the Democrats are going to take control of the Senate, increase the majority in the House.
Impeach him again.
Right, impeach him again. You know, so all that chatter is coming now at a moment in time where businesses don't have a lot of time to react. I mean, if you're a big manufacturing company, you shut your plants down for a portion of the summer because you want your production workers to have their vacations. I mean, it's just you can't change that. You've got these people cooped up, you know, at home with their kids, and there's going to have to be a respite in the summer. So, you know, we're looking at a situation here where you could get to August and find Hillary Clinton replacing Joe Biden. The people who feel that she is, like Stacey Abrams, is the legitimate governor of Georgia, they'll love it.
Yeah.
You know, and it'll be Donald Trump's going to steal the election again, working with the Russians. We'll hear all that chatter. And if Durham doesn't do anything before then, after around September 4th or thereabouts, the 60-day rule is going to be in effect, and there will be no public prosecutions of anything related to the Russian hoax, where there really should be. I mean, what we're learning now from what's come out, we've been on this, you and I, since the very beginning, saying, wait a minute, with a special counsel. You know, special counsels are not supposed to investigate people. What's the crime? Where's the crime? And why did this, you know, this great patrician Robert Mueller, you know, who seems to be very good at prosecuting the wrong people when he was head of the FBI, why did this guy accept appointment as special prosecutor? How did he get to be chosen? What was Rosenstein's role in all this? And how did he get moving in the direction that he was moving so aggressively for so long, when the very beginning of the thing, it was corruptly started? You know, the investigation, we now know from the stuff that dribbled out in the last several days, We know that the FBI knew there was no reason to go after Flynn. But stroke, this guy who's, spending too much time stroking Lisa Page, he's in charge with Lisa Page of the mishandling of, the decision to have a fake investigation to go and look at Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information. And then he's the person who's assigned to get Trumpy. And then when that doesn't work alone, let's get Flynn as well. Yeah. This same team. And we've allowed them now, 4 years? To get away with all this crap? I mean, it's just, I don't have the patience of Donald Trump. I would have long ago arranged for, I might even have tipped off CNN, arranged for 3 times the number of agents that went after Roger Stone to show up at Christopher Wray's house on a Sunday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I agree with you completely, Charles. He's got to do something. I mean, I remain supportive of President Trump, and I feel that I believe, there's reason to believe that he's cornered right now, but he's got to do something. The country is, Charles, when I see thug cops enforcing the medically unsound orders of fundamentally corrupt medical doctors, and then other cops defending that behavior, we're lost.
Yeah, and the tension on the street. I got here a little early, so I was waiting downstairs, and I was drawn into this spectacle of I think an Uber driver decided that he was going to get out of his car and throw trash all over the street, even though he's right next to a trash barrel that was empty. And somebody walking his dog with a face mask took issue. And that escalated almost into a fist fight. I mean, it was a loud argument. And then around the corner, you have in front of the papaya store, you have your
hot dog place.
Yeah, you have your three or four.
The constituency
right.
of the unemployed who live there and threaten anyone who comes out of the subway and spit on you too.
Right, and then as I walked up the subway, because it's raining out there, I took the subway. When I walked up the subway steps, at the landing, there's
a guy saying, "Give me $1." Right?
No, it was worse.
Oh, he's not there today.
I'll get to that in a second. There were two pair of soiled pants. One on one side and another pair, and then you make the trip up the stairs, and the guy you're talking about, a guy, was sitting there threateningly.
That guy's there every day.
Yeah.
That guy's dangerous.
Yeah.
I told a cop about that guy, and he was like, "Oh, transit will take care of it." He was literally sitting in his car outside Whole Foods with the windows closed, texting on his phone.
Right.
And I said, "Dude, it's right over there. Transit cops are nowhere around."
Right.
Fat, overweight cop.
Right. Yeah, so I think we are sort of on edge here, and it wouldn't take much. We haven't seen, I actually witnessed an Antifa wind-up riot at 42nd Street and 5th at the Bryant Park entrance to the subway.
What do you mean an Antifa wind-up riot?
They wanted to agitate, I forget against what, they wanted free passage on the subways or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And they came, and it was really well organized. They had signs printed that all were the same.
This was a couple of weeks ago.
Actually, it was in March, the one I saw, and right around the time they shut down the library. And a whole bunch of people came. They were mostly young students, and I mean even junior high students, and they were having a good time. And then they had these scruffy, thuggish law students who were ready to help if there was any kind of legal trouble. And they tried to storm the cops. They tried to get past the cops and get in, and they actually had, at Grand Central Station, they had gotten in to the subway, and they defaced and threw crap on the ticket selling machines so you couldn't use them.
Wow.
And I'm waiting for that to come. We're going to have something like that happen. There you go.
And this is what I'm thinking about. So they're talking about throwing Roger Stone in prison while I've seen articles that they're letting murderers and rapists out of prison because they're worried about them getting coronavirus. First of all, sorry, if you're in prison and you get sick, I imagine there's a lot of things you could catch in prison. Why are they releasing people? Because of the possibility of getting a viral infection. That makes no sense. But when we look at this, when the prison doors are open, the real dragon will fly out. Isn't this part of the Marxist plan to take over?
Of course it is. And so when we look at this window, we're May 6th. Memorial Day, I think, it's early this year. It's like May 23rd or something.
I don't know.
I don't know. We can look it up. But and once Memorial Day opens, I mean, this idiot we have for a mayor has said that the pools in the summer of 2020, Monday, May 25th, the pools are not going to be open in New York City. I mean, I wonder what they're going to do about the beaches. Oh, what is this?
Well,
is this new?
This was from last night's episode of More Pain. Mike Moore broke the story that there's a renewed interest here that Durham is speaking to some of the federal agents that Mike Moore had spoken to, and that's
great.
Yeah, Mike had told us that those federal agents who were investigating the Clinton Foundation were really upset. And so now, people who aren't subscribed on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth can join and see last night's episode. Robert Milstein tells me that I'm not aware of what's really going on. So I don't know what he's aware of that I'm not, or what he's implying, but it's an interesting comment that happened to catch my eye. People can get onto truepundit.com and read that. The thing that I wanted to point out also, Charles, is that Mike had a story in True Pundit here that the NYPD was putting together a task force of 1,000 police to shut down people's barbecues.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now, I never know how somebody wants to spell barbecue, vegan runner. I don't know. It's on there on True Pundit, but that is just absurd stupidity to me that you're going to shut down barbecues, but you let homeless people stand literally for days. It's the same guy. He spit on me one time. He gets angry if you won't talk to him. He's like, give me $1. And if you walk away, he's saying, hey, followed me halfway down the street. That's when I told the cop, and he literally did nothing.
Right.
But if you're black and standing on Avenue C talking to your girlfriend, they'll step on your neck, they'll box your ears, they'll slap you, punch you, drag you to jail.
That's outrageous stuff.
It's worse than outrageous. I think that police officer Francisco Garcia needs to be charged with treason for enforcing an illegal order that is in direct defiance. He is a domestic enemy of the Constitution of the United States. I want that guy in prison for life. And send a message to cops, to people in the Army. If you are a mindless drone enforcing criminal orders, you're part of the problem. Frank Serpico said that a culture, I don't know if this is still true, but when he was there, Frank Serpico said, a culture exists in the NYPD that causes honest cops to fear dishonest cops. And if we cannot break that culture,
right,
we're lost.
I saw that myself, actually. I think I've told you this before, but when I was living on 82nd Street between Lex and 3rd, I happened to wake up because I heard a noise in the middle of the night, and it was, I looked down several stories, and I see a cop car going, with its lights, and it's facing the wrong direction, shining down the street. And then I see what they're looking for, and there's this idiot kid, who thinks he's going to escape the cops by going underneath a car. So he goes underneath the car, and the cops get out of the car, and they beat the living crap out of him in front of me. I mean, there's no way I could stop it, but the kid put his head out, on the pavement, and they stomped his head, started kicking him. And ultimately they dragged him out, and they put him on the side of the car, they're beating him, and they stuffed him in the back of the car, and they left. And that's just, I don't care what the criminal may have been doing, that is not, you do that kind of behavior, you let that stuff happen, go unpunished, and then what happens is people are reluctant to go to the police.
Right.
People like me, I mean, I've had the one experience with the FBI where they came, they were trying to manufacture a crazy story about me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had my ducks in a row. And, I should have thought, could have at that moment of time, I could easily said, look, my ex-wife is dying right now, but I'll make time for you. I mean, it was pretty nice of me to do that, actually, maybe stupid. But I'm thinking about it, unless there's reform at the FBI, I don't think anybody should talk to the FBI. Anybody.
Well, they've done nothing for me, and that goes for the NYPD as well. I've spoken to them about harassment, unrelated to the social engineers. I've gone to the NYPD when I've been physically attacked. I went into the 10th precinct to ask them what I should do with regard to being attacked the evening after it occurred, and the officer who responded to the call literally intimidated me, told me to get out of the precinct house, told me I should drop the charges, told me I was a pain in the ass, and that's why I got hit with a pipe. And I literally stood there in the police precinct. I looked around at all the cops, and I said, what the hell is going on in here? Protect and serve. You guys. And I just left. If I were black, they would have beaten me up right in the station, said I was resisting something, throw me in the jail. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, it is. And it's also, just on a wandering a little, but I think it's to a good place. There's a debate now that's going to really start to rage between blue state politicians.
Right, opening the red states.
Well, saying that the blue states, which are basically deficit-plagued, corruption-ridden, were losing money and in deep trouble for their ridiculous pension obligations and mismanagement of pension assets, that those same blue states are now going to concoct arguments why they want financial rescue packages under a theory that, you know, if businesses can get rescue packages, why shouldn't California, why shouldn't New York, why shouldn't these states, Massachusetts and others that are structurally insolvent, Illinois, that have too many public service employees on the books,
beating people up,
too many retirees at pensions that no private business can afford. These blue states are now going to come forward and say, damn it, you know, there's a $2 or $3 trillion rescue package so far, we want $4 trillion or something, and then they're going to agitate. And these blue states are key electoral college states, many of them. Now, I with a person, we won't reveal his name, but a good friend of ours in Texas, I was talking to him about this, and he was telling me, Texas is not going to be paying for the sins of New York. They're just not going to do it. It's not going to happen. In fact, he told me that he had ventured to an ammunition store, one of the largest gun and ammunition stores, and he's a gun enthusiast and living in Texas, and he said that he was amazed. There were no guns for sale because they'd all been bought.
Whoa!
And there's no ammunition for sale. And he talked to the clerk, and he said the situation is, the demand is so high that when ammunition supplies come in on a pallet, they don't make it to the shelf. The customers they're taking it off the pallet on the way to the shelves.
Wow!
And so I don't say that with glee. I just say that, you know, this is a dangerous moment. Tension is building here. It's not really Trump who is stoking it, I don't think. It's more Nancy Pelosi and the do-nothing Democrats, Chuck Schumer. And we're owed. I mean, I'm glad to see the True Pundit story. We are owed now. It's been 5 years, more than 5 years, that I've been trying to make an issue of this Clinton Foundation, which is an obvious, massive fraud. It is an enabling, it itself is a fraud, but it has enabled frauds around the world. Bill Clinton has been, Sorry?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates and others have been at this for a long, long time. Here we have the ice cream queen.
Well, the reason I brought that up, Charles, I wanted to ask you something. Someone has emailed me that this Jenny's, I was going to get a pint of this for you and I to try. I was incorrect when I said it was $13. It's $9.99 at Whole Foods, which is still a crazy, I think it's $2.99 for a thing of regular ice cream. But the thing I wanted to ask you is someone told me that this Jenny's ice cream, she's Les Wexner's daughter. Is that true?
We should look it up. Just Google it. Speaking of Les Wexner, somebody just sent me an email with a story suggesting that Les Wexner was centrally involved in this whole Epstein-related ring. It wasn't just providing Epstein money. He was allegedly involved in going after young people.
I believe it.
Here we go, yeah.
Splendid ice cream. What does it say? Doesn't include Les. Is it Shop Jenny? Let's see if it says Wexner.
Jenny Britton Bauer. Let's see.
She serves on the board of the Wexner Center. Here, now it wants us to sign up for something here.
She probably lives in the Columbus area.
When she isn't developing new flavors or art directing new campaigns, she devotes time to local matters, serves on the board of the Wexner Center for the Arts.
Yeah, so she's from Columbus, where Wexner is originally from.
But that's not the same as being her daughter,
right?
His daughter.
Doesn't sound, look at her name, Jenny Britton Bauer. There's no Wexner in it.
So she's on the board of the Wexner thing. That's interesting. And then someone else had sent me something that indicated multiple like major purchases of that ice cream, that when you looked at it, it was some kind of campaign contribution or something. We need to look more into that Jenny's ice cream and see what's going on there. This is a story we didn't really get to discuss with Dr. Mikovits, but I mean, I'm really interested to know. She's going to have the type of intimate knowledge about some of the things that are spoken about in these articles. And even if she wasn't directly involved, something that might seem sinister to the casual reader, like, moving genetic material or whatever, she might say, no, that's being done for this or that technical reason. Or she might say, yeah, that's highly suspicious. So definitely going to want to try to get Dr. Mikovits back on.
Yeah, another thing I would say, just in trying to sum up a little bit, is that in this medical area, we see some of the same problems that occur in the financial area. The regulators in the medical area now turn out to be corrupt. I don't know where the price closed out today, or will close out today on GE, but I noticed that before the show started, I checked, and it was down just a shade above $6.
Ooh.
Yeah, here we are, 602 at 326. I mean, that's really dangerous territory for this stock.
I'd like it to go down to 333, Charles.
Its last low before this recent cycle was 666.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's a new low. When's the last time it was?
So we have 52-week low is 590. At one point, it got to 590. I mean, this is, it's the Wall Street Journal is more expensive per copy or almost more expensive per copy than a share of GE stock.
That's pretty funny. Wow. Well, I think this has been really an excellent episode. People are unaware of the hand-wringing and, real energy and attention that went into deciding a movie for today, because we wanted something that would be appropriate for Dr. Mikovits without casting her in any kind of unfavorable light. She didn't seem to have a great reaction to this image initially. But my idea was that, this guy is the psychopath who needs to be muzzled and imprisoned, and she's being silenced by that. I forget what that moth was or what the purpose of that was in the movie, but...
Not one of my favorite. I'm not a horror movie guy.
It's a weird film. Well, Charles, it's been a very, very interesting show. Anything else you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think you have people who might want to subscribe. You might want to mention that.
I'm glad you brought that up, Charles, because it is really important for people to become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. I keep it inexpensive because I don't want it to be a thing where people feel a financial burden, but there's a couple of reasons I do it. First of all, we've already seen that social engineering happens from Dr. Fauci on television, and that's got huge support behind it, financial and otherwise, and it happens here in social media. Thousands of fake accounts. I've identified a Twitter account that I am 99% certain is a sock puppet account being used by Kevin Shipp to troll me. And I will present evidence to substantiate that claim. I'm working on it right now. But the idea is they can use thousands of fake accounts on Twitter, thousands of fake accounts on Facebook, on YouTube, to create this false consensus that perhaps something I'm reporting is incorrect. Some fake story that's made up about me is something that people should believe. So by introducing this $2 per month minimum sponsorship fee, it makes it dramatically more difficult for someone to introduce thousands of fake accounts to try to crap around in there. And it also makes sure that there's not some, sponsor, like there was this storable food company that wanted to sponsor the show. And I haven't evaluated the company at all. I haven't tasted the food. It might be great. But I just felt like promoting storable food at a time that people were becoming afraid that they might not be able to get food, it just seemed like taking advantage of the thing. The product is the show, and if people like and watch the show, I hope they'll become sponsors by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and they get access to a huge library of sponsor-exclusive content. I will see everybody there. Charles, on Sunday, will we be back to the standard format on Sunday?
We'll see.
We'll see how the weather is and everything. Yeah. But thank you very much for this episode, and I'm so glad we got Dr. Mikovits. That was a hard interview subject to get nailed down, because a lot of people are talking to her now, and she's finally getting out there. I hope that her message can reach President Trump, and that the really horrendous wrongs that Fauci has done to her and the rest of us can be righted.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Charles, and I'll see everybody tonight. I may be back tonight. I'm still working on the schedule, but I'll see everybody soon. Thanks for watching.